We fell in love over the mutual hatred of one man's invention.
I invented the most hated and most loved font in the world.
This video tells the story of three people: Vincent Kinnair, who created the font Comic Sans, and Holly and Dave Combs, who began the Ban Comic Sans movement.
We feel that Comic Sans is a blight on the landscape of typography.
The problem with it is your average person is uninformed. It's tools in the hands of morons.
It's the first in a series of 8 videos entitled Influencers and Innovation, produced, directed, and edited by Eric Jankstrom of Kings County Productions. I spoke to Eric over Zoom about the impetus for the project.
It was for Huffington Post, and their client Verizon was the sponsor of the series. They wanted interesting stories. They wanted it to be tech related, but not like nitty gritty, R&D tech stories.
First we meet Vincent Kinnair, who relays the tale of Comic Sans' invention.
I was working at Microsoft. The consumer division wanted to know what we thought about the fonts used in this program, which later was called Microsoft Bob. When I loaded the CD, a little dog came up, but he talked in a speech balloon like you would get in a newspaper cartoon strip, but it was in the system font Times New Roman. I thought, that's silly. Dogs don't talk like that. So I said, it would look better if it looked like a comic book. I took a look at what I saw, tried to recreate it with a mouse on a computer screen, and I quickly drew up in about 3 days enough letters so they could test it. When Windows 95 shipped, Comic Sans was on every computer in the world.
Then we meet co-influencers on the tech world, Holly and Dave Combs, graphic designers with a passion for typography and strong feelings on the use of Comic Sans.
Ban Comic Sans is a campaign to eradicate the misuse of the font Comic Sans. We wanted people to start talking about fonts and how they use them, and when they use them inappropriately, we wanted to call it out.
It's all over the world. It's like creeped into the souls of everyone.
Another element Jankstrom adds to further the story of Comic Sans and its range of influence is a music video by Andrew Gunnady, aka Gunnarolla, and his Comic Sans song.
Comic Sans is the best font in the world. If you want your designs to look like they're done by little girls.
Not so fast, Ransom.
Comic Sans! Comic Sans best used in moderation.
Comic Sans' reach is broad, serving as many people's go-to font.
You can't go anywhere without seeing Comic Sans. We're right now in the south of France, the only restaurant in town. The entire dessert menu is in Comic Sans. Their opening hours are in Comic Sans. The sign in the toilet is in Comic Sans.
You'll see a sign that says wet paint. Are they just kidding? Is it a joke?
Do you know what people do when they see that?
They touch it.
Holly, Dave, and Vincent have each had an impact on culture, but Jankstrom highlights them as influencers on each other as well.
I think he realizes he wouldn't be as famous for making the font if it weren't for our efforts to ban it.
Without Comic Sans, they probably wouldn't have ever gotten together as a couple. So I think I'm quite proud of that.
The video, though informative of cultural phenomena, draws its strength from the warmth and easy humor of its subjects, best exhibited by Holly and Dave relaying the somewhat mythologized story of how they fell in love.
Dave and I met in 2000, and I worked with a client, and they told me, you have to do an entire gallery guide in Comic Sans.
Holly tells me, and I say, why don't we just ban it? Let's make a campaign to ban Comic Sans.
And I looked at him and I was like, do you want to get married?
When I spoke to Dave Combs over Zoom, he recounted with me how Eric Jankstrom's approach and demeanor allowed him to feel relaxed as an interviewee.
Normally I'm a little tense at the beginning of an interview, but he did such a great job of putting us at ease and making me feel relaxed. The way he kind of prepared us without rehearsing it or giving us the questions ahead of time. So he got our sort of natural reactions without us thinking it through and, just seeing what we were going to say ahead of time.
The success of the video flows from interesting, engaging subjects and a creator's relatable, approachable style of filming, interviewing, and editing. Most telling of Eric Jankstrom's accomplishments as a storyteller is in the following statement from Dave Combs.
I show it to people when they say, what is Band Comic Sans? I send them to that video because I'm like, well, it's a very well, encapsulated definition of what we're doing with the Band Comic Sans campaign. So I feel like they really got at the heart of it.
The current status of the Combses movement has shifted from its Band Comic Sans roots.
I kind of flipped it a little bit. You've seen the used Comic Sans stuff. It was so uncool that it kind of did a 180 and became cool again. So I kind of sort of played off that.
So next time you're debating the font for your project, maybe just use Comic Sans.
If you like Comic Sans, just use it. It's there to be used and enjoyed.
Comic Sans is the best font in the world. If you want your designs to look like they're done by little girls.